Ondas might be one of the most misunderstood stocks on the market today. And the numbers behind the story are starting to get interesting. Because in a very short period of time, this company has partnered with Palantir to integrate artificial intelligence into its systems, gain access over $1 billion in government contract opportunities, and is now building what it calls a multi-domain defense platform. So that sounds like a company moving very quickly in very important industry. But at the same time, there's a major risk that could slow everything down. And that is exactly why short sellers are still involved in this stock. So the real question is, are we looking at the early stages of something big or a story that is getting ahead of itself? To really understand Ondas, you have to zoom out and look at what's happening globally. We are in a period where geopolitical tensions are rising, conflicts are becoming more complex, and technology is no longer just a support tool. It's becoming the foundation of how modern defense systems operate. And at the same time, governments around the world are increasing spending on intelligence, surveillance, and automation. So this is not a short-term period. It is a structural shift. Here you can see the Strait of Hormuz and how the boats go through the strait. I'm sure one day if the United States controls the Strait of Hormuz, then Ondas might get future contracts for surveillance around the strait. Could get interesting. At the moment, Iran exports 90% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. So when capital starts flowing into a sector like that, it tends to create very large winners. That is why companies like Palantir have become so important. They sit at the intersection of data, artificial intelligence, and national security. So when you see a smaller company like Ondas moving into that same ecosystem, it immediately becomes more interesting because the market already understands how big the opportunity can be. Now here we are, the story starting to evolve. Ondas is not the same company as it was a few years ago, and that is critical to understand. Here is Eric Brock talking about Ondas building their autonomous systems for 2026.
And the simple answer is we have to execute the plan. You've seen us spend a lot of time and energy building out the infrastructure at Ondas Autonomous Systems, and that's going to be critical. It's as I'm sure you know, but I'll say it anyway. Is the leadership team led by Oshie Lagasse? We put that number up, and of course, there's various people with various responsibilities to build up. Whether you're at Centrix or RoboTeam or Aerobotics, etc. We all have our objectives, and we have to deliver and execute. I'll say this: that the team is really energized to do better, right? So let's see where we can take this. But the key thing will be for us to continue, to put the leadership and the infrastructure for growth. And what we're really doing at OAS is building a platform to handle much higher revenue levels and business activities than that $375 million, right? We're building it for, to be able to build a really substantial company over a 3 to 5 year period. We're going to keep making those investments.
So with the acquisition of Worldview Enterprises, the company has expanded beyond its original focus and is now entering into the space stratospheric intelligence and surveillance. Here's Worldview Enterprises. Better data, faster insight, smarter decisions. That means it's no longer limited to ground-based systems or even traditional drones. It now has the ability to operate at extremely high altitudes, collecting data over wide geographic areas for extended periods of time. This kind of persistent surveillance capability is extremely valuable in defense, border security, and infrastructure monitoring. So instead of thinking about Ondas as a single product company, it is more accurate to think of a company that's trying to build an entire system. And that leads directly into what may be the most important part of the story. Ondas is working to build a unified AI-enabled multi-domain defense platform, and is doing that in partnership with Palantir. Which sounds complex, but the idea is very straightforward. The company is trying to connect multiple layers of technology, drones in the air, sensors, and robotics on the ground, and now high-altitude surveillance systems into one integrated network. Then, on top of that network, you add artificial intelligence that can process all that data in real time and turn it into actionable insights. This is exactly how modern defense systems are evolving. It's no longer about isolated tools. It's about connected systems that can see more, respond faster, and operate efficiently. If Ondas can execute on this vision, it moves from being a niche player to being part of a larger strategic shift. Now, this is where the story becomes even more of just a concept. Ondas has already taken steps that suggest this platform is not just theoretical. The company now has access to more than $1 billion in existing government contract opportunities, which just significantly changes its positioning. Instead of trying to break into the system from the outside, it's beginning to operate within established procurement channels. On top of that, the company is pursuing contracts that could exceed $50 million, including projects related to border security and demining operations. These are not small pilot programs. These are real-world use cases with meaningful revenue potential. And when a company starts moving from ideas to actual contracts, that is when the market starts to paying closer attention. And the market has already started to react to this story. Ondas currently at around $9.13 as close as the market closed yesterday, Friday. And over the past 3 years, the stock has delivered an extraordinary return of nearly 900%. So you can see 3 years ago or so, 3 years ago, the stock was at about 90 cents, and now we're at $9. So that's a solid return. And so that kind of move tells you that investors are already aware of the potential here. But however, in the short term, the price action has been much more mixed. There have been small gains followed by pullbacks, which suggests that the market is still trying to decide how to value this company. That uncertainty is important because it creates both opportunity and risk at the same time. Now let's talk about the part of the story that is often overlooked, and that's dilution of the stock. Ondas has been aggressively raising capital in order to fund its growth strategy, including acquisitions and expansions in the new markets. While that can accelerate growth, it also means the company's issuing more shares. And when more shares are issued, each existing share represents a smaller portion of the company. A smaller way to think of this is if you own a slice of pizza and the company keeps cutting the pizza into more slices, your piece becomes smaller. Current estimates suggest that Ondas has somewhere between roughly 380 to 480 million diluted shares outstanding, which is a significant number for a company at this stage. This does not automatically make the company a bad investment, but it does raise an important question. Can the company generate enough revenue and growth to offset this dilution? Which brings us to why short sellers are still involved in this stock. At the moment, you can tell that short sellers of the short float percent is 35% of all shares. The short interest is $164.35, and the short ratio is around 1.7. The most powerful moves in the market often happen when there is a strong disagreement between investors. As Ondas currently sits in that tension. On one side, you have a compelling growth story with real catalysts. And on the other, you have legitimate concerns about dilution, execution, and timing. And if the company begins to deliver tangible results, such as converting contracts into meaningful revenue, that balance can shift very quickly. And when that happens, short sellers may be forced to cover their positions, which can accelerate the upward movement of the stock. So what ultimately determines the outcome here is not speculation, and it's not headlines. It's going to be execution. Winning contracts, scaling deployments, and demonstrating consistent revenue. Those are the factors that will define whether this story becomes a reality. Ondas is no longer just a drone company. It's attempting to position itself as a multi-domain AI-driven defense platform. The opportunity is clearly there. So are the risks, but so are the risks. And it is that balance between potential and uncertainty that makes this one of the most interesting setups in the market today. So, I want to hear from you. Do you think Ondas is building something real, or is this story moving faster than the business itself? How much does the dilution matter in your decision? Let me know in the comments. See you in the next one.